were steady as he helped his 3-year-old son Tommy stack wooden blocks in their suburban Philadelphia living room. "Higher, Daddy," Tommy giggled, his tiny fingers struggling with the red block. Victor smiled, a rare expression that only his son could draw from him. The afternoon sun streamed through the large bay windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Michelle, his wife of 5 years, had gone to her book club again. She'd begun a lot of book clubs lately. The sound of shattering glass exploded through the house. Victor's training kicked in instantly. He grabbed Tommy, diving behind the leather couch as masked figures poured through the broken windows. 3 men, military precision, coordinated entry. This wasn't a random break-in. "Take the kid. Leave the father," one of them barked, his voice muffled behind a black balaclava. Victor's blood turned to ice. They knew. They knew exactly who lived here, knew about Tommy. His hand instinctively reached for the Glock he kept in the coffee table drawer, but a tranquilizer dart hit his neck before he could move. The last thing he saw was Tommy's terrified face as rough hands lifted his son away. "Daddy!" Tommy screamed, reaching out with small arms. Victor tried to fight the sedative, his vision blurring. Through the haze, he caught a glimpse of something that would haunt him. One of the attackers had a distinctive tattoo on his wrist, a serpent wrapped around a dagger. He'd seen that tattoo before. Darkness claimed him. Victor's eyes opened to the sterile white ceiling of a hospital room. The steady beep of monitors and the antiseptic smell filled his senses. A paramedic, no, a doctor, stood beside his bed, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Ross, you're awake. I'm Dr. Patricia Keller. You've been unconscious for 18 hours. Tommy," Victor rasped, his throat raw. "Where's my son?" Dr. Keller's expression grew somber. "The police found you unconscious in your home. There is evidence of a break-in, but—" She paused, consulting her notes. "Your wife is nowhere to be found, but your son is." "Is what?" Victor's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Missing. Both your wife and son vanished. The FBI is treating this as a kidnapping case." Victor's mind raced. Michelle missing too? That changed everything. The professional way the attackers moved, their specific instructions, the fact that they'd known to leave him alive. This was planned. But by whom? FBI agent Harry Riggs entered the room, his weathered face serious. "Mr. Ross, I need to ask you some questions. Do you have any enemies? Anyone who might want to hurt your family?" Victor studied the agent carefully. In his line of work, he'd learned to read people like books. Riggs seemed genuine, but Victor trusted no one completely. "I run a security firm. I've made enemies, but nothing that would justify this level of operation." Victor sat up despite the doctor's protests. "My son, do you have any leads?" "We're working every angle," Riggs assured him. "But we need your help. Can you think of anyone who knew your daily routine? Who would know when you'd be home alone with your son?" The question hit Victor like a punch to the gut. Michelle. She knew his schedule better than anyone. She knew about his evening routine with Tommy, knew when he'd be vulnerable. But that was impossible. Michelle loved Tommy more than life itself. She'd never. The serpent tattoo flashed in his memory. Where had he seen it before? "Agent Riggs," Victor said slowly. "I want to see the crime scene. Now." "Mr. Ross, you need a rest. Now." Victor's voice carried the authority of a man who'd commanded soldiers in combat zones. "And I want a full list of everyone who's been in contact with my wife in the past month." Something cold and calculating settled in Victor's chest. He'd spent 10 years in special forces before starting his business. He'd tracked terrorists through mountains and desert. If someone had taken his son, he would find them. And when he did, he would show them why his former unit had called him the Wolf. Chapter 2. Unveiled Truths. Victor's house looked like a war zone. Police tape fluttered in the evening breeze as he walked through the front door, Agent Riggs at his side. The living room windows had been boarded up, broken glass swept into neat piles that crime scene techs had photographed from every angle. The attack was coordinated, Riggs explained, pointing to scuff marks on the walls. 3 entry points, professional execution. But here's what's strange. Nothing was stolen. Your safe wasn't even touched. Victor knelt where he'd last held Tommy, his fingers tracing the outline where his son's toys had been scattered. The coffee table drawer hung open. His Glock was missing, along with his backup piece from the bedroom. They knew where I kept my weapons, Victor murmured. What was that? Nothing. Victor stood, his jaw clenched. Have you found any leads on Michelle's whereabouts? Riggs consulted his notepad. We've been checking her usual haunts. Her book club, the gym, her sister's place. But we hit something interesting at the book club. Victor's head snapped up. What kind of interesting? Turns out there was no book club meeting yesterday. In fact, according to the organizer, your wife hasn't attended a meeting in over 2 months. The words hit Victor like physical blows. 2 months. Michelle had been lying to him for 2 months, claiming to go to book club meetings every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Where was she going? Victor's voice was deadly quiet. We're still investigating, but we pulled her phone records. She's been in frequent contact with someone named Santiago Ellison. Ring any bells? The name meant nothing to Victor, but the frequency of calls, daily, sometimes multiple times per day, painted a clear picture. His hands curled into fists. I want to see those records. Mr. Ross, I understand you're upset, but this is an active investigation. Agent Riggs. Victor's voice carried a dangerous edge. Someone broke into my home, drugged me, and took my son. My wife has been lying to me for months and is now missing. I've been patient, but my patience has limits. Riggs studied Victor's face and seemed to recognize something there. The look of a predator deciding whether to strike. Let me make some calls, Riggs said finally. While the agent stepped outside, Victor moved through his house like a ghost, seeing it with new eyes. Michelle's behavior over the past months suddenly made sense. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way she'd pull away when he tried to touch her. In their bedroom, he opened Michelle's jewelry box, a place she thought he'd never look. Hidden beneath the velvet lining, he found what he was looking for, a burner phone. The call history made his blood run cold. Dozens of calls to and from Santiago Ellison, but it was the text messages that shattered what remained of his world. Victor's getting suspicious. We need to move up the timeline. Don't worry, baby. After tonight, we'll be free. You, me, and Tommy can start fresh in Costa Rica. Are you sure the team knows not to hurt him? I don't want blood on my hands. Just a little sedative. He'll wake up and find his family gone. Clean and simple. Victor's vision turned red. Michelle hadn't been kidnapped. She'd orchestrated everything. She'd planned to steal his son and disappear with her lover, leaving him drugged and alone. But something had gone wrong. Tommy was missing, not safely spirited away to Costa Rica. The front door opened, and Riggs returned with a manila folder. I've got those phone records, but there's something else you need to see. He handed Victor a photograph. We found this in your wife's car at the airport parking garage. The photo showed Michelle laughing in the arms of a tall, dark-haired man with sharp features and cold eyes. But it was the man's exposed forearm that made Victor's breath catch. There, clear as day, was the serpent and dagger tattoo. Santiago Ellison, the man from his nightmares. We've identified him, Riggs continued. Santiago Ellison, 36, former military contractor. He's got connections to some very dangerous people. Victor studied the photo, memorizing every detail of Ellison's face. What kind of connections? The kind that specialize in making people disappear. We think your wife hired him to stage the kidnapping, but something went sideways. You think he double-crossed her? Or she double-crossed him? Either way, your son is caught in the middle. Victor pocketed the burner phone and headed for the door. Where are you going? Riggs called after him. To find my son. Mr. Ross, you need to let us handle this. If you go off on your own. Victor turned, and Riggs stepped back involuntarily. The man who faced him wasn't a grieving father anymore. He was something far more dangerous. Agent Riggs, I've spent the last 5 years playing the role of suburban dad, try to leave my past behind. But some people mistake kindness for weakness. Victor's voice was arctic. Michelle and her boyfriend are about to learn the difference. You can't take the law into your own hands. Watch me. As Victor walked into the gathering dusk, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 3 years. It rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. Well, I'll be damned. Victor Ross. I thought you'd gone soft in the suburbs. Hello, Wes. I need a favor. Wes McCall had been Victor's sergeant in Afghanistan, a man who specialized in finding people who didn't want to be found. What kind of favor? The kind you used to do for Uncle Sam. Someone took my boy, and I'm going to get him back. I'll be there in 6 hours. And Victor, yeah, it's good to have the wolf back. Chapter 3, The Scent of Vengeance. The abandoned warehouse in South Philadelphia looked like every other decaying industrial building in the area, but Victor knew better. Wes McCall had arrived as promised, bringing with him 2 other members of their old unit. Louise Frost, their former demolitions expert, and Charlie Schaefer, whose talent for surveillance and reconnaissance was legendary. Just like old times, Luis grinned, checking his equipment in the dim light of a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. Except this time it's personal. Victor spread aerial photos of a luxury apartment complex across a makeshift table. Santiago Ellison owns a penthouse here. According to my source, he's been using it as a base of operations for his consulting business. Charlie looked up from his laptop, which was running facial recognition software on security footage from around the city. About something. Michelle was spotted at a hotel in Atlantic City yesterday morning. The Grandview Resort, checking in under the name Maria Santos. Any sign of Tommy? Negative. She was alone. Victor's jaw tightened. If Michelle was in Atlantic City and Tommy wasn't with her, that meant Ellison had the boy. The question was whether Tommy was leverage for a double cross or if something darker was at play. What about Ellison's background? Victor asked. Wes consulted his notes. Born in El Salvador, immigrated as a kid. Military service, Marine Recon, deployed to Iraq twice. Discharged under suspicious circumstances 8 years ago. Since then, he's been working freelance. Kidnapping, extortion, wet work. He's good at what he does. Not good enough, Victor said coldly. What else? He's got a sister, Josefina Ewing, lives in Camden. Clean record, works as a nurse. But here's the interesting part. She has a 5-year-old daughter. Ellison's been helping support them financially. Charlie pulled up more surveillance footage. I've tracked his movements over the past week. He's been careful, but not careful enough. He's got a routine. Every morning at 7, he stops at a coffee shop called Ramona's on Pine Street, orders the same thing, sits at the same table, reads the paper for exactly 20 minutes. Victor studied the photos of the coffee shop. It was a small place, family-owned, with limited exits and clear sight lines. Perfect for what he had in mind. There's something else, Wes said, his voice growing serious. I made some calls to old contacts. Word on the street is that Ellison's been putting together something big, a job that would set him up for life. The timeline matches with when your wife started planning this whole thing. What kind of job? The kind that requires a very specific type of expertise and a very specific type of cover story. Understanding dawned in Victor's eyes. They weren't just planning to steal Tommy and run. This was bigger. Luis nodded grimly. We think they were using the kidnapping as a smokescreen for something else. Maybe a robbery, maybe worse. But something went wrong with their plan, which means Tommy is now a loose end. The weight of those words settled over the group like a shroud. If Ellison saw Tommy as a liability rather than leverage, the boy was in immediate danger. Victor's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Pier 47, midnight. Come alone or the boy dies. Michelle. She was reaching out. It's a trap, Charlie said immediately. Obviously. Victor checked his watch, 10:30 p.m. But it's also an opportunity. Victor, you can't seriously be considering. I'm not going to negotiate with her. Victor's voice was like ice scraping on stone. I'm going to make her tell me where my son is. And then I'm going to make her pay for what she's done. Wes recognized the look in his former commander's eyes. What do you need us to do? Charlie, I want you monitoring every frequency, every camera in a 6-block radius of that pier. Luis, I need you in position with a rifle, high ground, clear sight lines. Wes, you're with me as backup, but stay out of sight unless things go sideways. And if they do go sideways... Victor checked his Sig Sauer P226, a weapon he'd carried through 3 tours of duty and countless private operations. Then Michelle and anyone working with her are going to learn why they should have left sleeping wolves alone. As the team prepared to move out, Victor's phone rang. Agent Riggs. Mr. Ross, we've got a problem. We found Michelle's car abandoned near the docks, but there was blood inside. Not a lot, but enough to suggest someone was hurt. Whose blood? We're running tests now, but Victor, there was also this. Riggs texted him a photo that made Victor's blood freeze. Tommy's small sneaker, torn and bloodstained, found on the floor of the car. I'm going to kill them, Victor said quietly. Mr. Ross, please, let us handle. Victor hung up and looked at his team. These men had followed him through hell in Afghanistan, had trusted him with their lives when the odds were impossible. Change of plans, he said. We're not just rescuing Tommy. We're ending this. All of it. What are you thinking? Wes asked. Victor smiled, and it was the coldest, most dangerous expression any of them had ever seen. I'm thinking it's time to remind some people why they used to be afraid of monsters in the dark. The warehouse fell silent except for the sound of weapons being checked and tactical gear being secured. The wolf was awake, and he was hunting. Chapter 4. Blood in the Water. Pier 47 jutted into the Delaware River like a finger pointing accusingly at the lights of Camden across the water. At 11:45 p.m., the area was deserted except for the distant sound of traffic and the gentle lapping of waves against the concrete pilings. Victor approached from the south, his footsteps silent on the weathered planks. Through his earpiece, he could hear Charlie's voice providing surveillance updates from his position in a nearby warehouse. 2 heat signatures on the pier. One female, approximately 5'6", positioned at the far end. One male, 6'2", concealed behind the shipping container 20 meters to your left. So Michelle hadn't come alone. Interesting. Any sign of child? Victor whispered. Negative. Just the 2 adults. Victor's jaw clenched. If Tommy wasn't here, this was either a distraction or Michelle truly didn't know where her son was. Either way, he would get answers. As he stepped into the pool of light at the end of the pier, Michelle emerged from the shadows. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect blonde hair was disheveled, her expensive clothes wrinkled and stained. But it was the fear in her eyes that told Victor everything he needed to know. Hello, Michelle. Victor, thank God you came. She rushed toward him, but stopped when she saw the expression on his face. You have to help me. Santiago, he's not who I thought he was. Really? And who did you think he was when you were planning to drug me and steal my son? Michelle's face went white. How did you? I found your burner phone. I read every text, Michelle. Every lying, scheming, treacherous word. Victor, please, you don't understand. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. No one was supposed to get hurt. Where's Tommy? I don't know. That's why I called you. Santiago was supposed to take him somewhere safe, but then everything went wrong. The men he hired, they weren't supposed to actually take Tommy. It was just supposed to look like a kidnapping while you what? Stole my money? Destroyed my life? Ran off to Costa Rica with your boyfriend? Michelle's composure cracked. I love him, Victor. I'm sorry, but I do. And Tommy loves him too. We could have been a family. The words hit Victor like physical blows, but his expression remained cold. Tommy loves him? How long has this been going on, Michelle? 6 months. Santiago's been coming to the house when you're at work, spending time with Tommy. He's good with children, Victor. Better than you ever were. Where is my son? I told you I don't know. Santiago called me this morning, said there'd been complications. The men he hired went off script, and now they're demanding more money. He said he needed time to figure things out. And you believed him? What choice do I have? If we go to the police now, we'll both go to prison. Tommy needs at least one parent who's free. Victor studied his wife, his soon-to-be ex-wife, and saw a stranger. How had he missed the selfishness, the casual cruelty, the willingness to destroy lives for her own gratification? Charlie, he whispered into his mic, status on our friend behind the container? Still in position. Looks like he's got a rifle. Professional setup. Victor, we can work together on this, Michelle continued, apparently unaware of the conversation in his earpiece. I know you hate me right now, but Tommy needs both of us. If we pool our resources. You're right about one thing, Victor interrupted. I do hate you, but not for the reasons you think. What do you mean? I hate you because you're weak. You're selfish and weak, and you've put our son in danger because you couldn't be bothered to think through the consequences of your actions. Michelle's face flushed with anger. Don't you dare lecture me about consequences. You think I don't know what you did overseas? What you're capable of. I've seen the nightmares, Victor. I've seen the scars. You're a killer, and I don't want my son growing up thinking that's normal. You're right again. I'm a killer. Victor's voice was barely above a whisper. And right now, that's exactly what Tommy needs. A shout rang out across the pier. Charlie's voice crackled through the earpiece. Rifleman is down. Luis took the shot. Clean kill. Michelle spun around at the sound, confusion and terror warring on her face. That was her boyfriend's insurance policy. The sniper he positioned to make sure I didn't leave this pier alive. Santiago's here? No, but his people were. Now they're dead. Michelle backed away from Victor, finally understanding that she was alone on a pier with a man she'd betrayed in the worst possible way. Victor, please, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far. And now Tommy is paying the price for your selfishness. He's my son, too. He was your son. The moment you decided to put him in danger for your own selfish desires, you stopped being his mother. Michelle's phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it, and her face went even paler. Oh God, what? It's Santiago. He says if I don't bring him $50,000 by tomorrow night, he's going to sell Tommy to people who specialize in making children disappear permanently. Victor felt something cold and final settle in his chest. Show me the message. With trembling hands, Michelle held up her phone. The text was explicit. Your husband's interference has complicated things. I need compensation for the increased risk. $50,000 by tomorrow, or the boy becomes someone else's problem. You see, Michelle said desperately, we have to work together. I can get the money from my accounts, but I need you to... She never finished the sentence. Victor's hand shot out, closing around her throat with surgical precision. Not enough pressure to kill, but enough to make his point crystal clear. Listen very carefully, he said, his voice utterly calm. You're going to call Santiago back. You're going to tell him you have the money. You're going to arrange a meeting. And then you're going to help me get my son back. And if I refuse? Victor's grip tightened slightly. Then you're going to discover that there are worse things than prison. He released her, and Michelle stumbled backward, gasping. You're insane. No, Michelle. I'm motivated. There's a difference. As Michelle fumbled with her phone, Victor spoke quietly into his mic. Wes, Charlie, Luis. We got a new target. Santiago Ellison just made this personal. What's the play? Wes asked. Victor watched Michelle place the call to her lover, watch her lie about having the money, watch her set up the meeting that would be Santiago's last mistake. We're going hunting. Chapter 5. The Devil's Bargain. The Grandview Resort in Atlantic City rose like a glass and steel monument to excess, its top floors offering panoramic views of the boardwalk and the dark Atlantic beyond. Room 2847 had been Santiago Ellison's home base for the past 3 days, a luxury suite that cost more per night than most people made in a week. Santiago stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of aged whiskey in his hand, watching the sun rise over the ocean. He was a man who appreciated beautiful things, and the view from his temporary penthouse was spectacular. His phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Package secured. Buyer confirmed for tomorrow. Transfer will be clean. Santiago smiled coldly. The boy had been more trouble than he'd anticipated, but the buyer in Eastern Europe paid premium prices for children with specific characteristics. Young, American, and from families wealthy enough that their disappearance would make headlines. Tommy Ross checked all the boxes. The original plan had been simple. Michelle would drug her husband. Santiago's team would stage a kidnapping, and they'd disappear to Costa Rica with the boy and a fabricated story about escaping the kidnappers. Michelle would inherit Victor's assets after his convenient suicide, and they'd live comfortably on his money while raising Tommy as their own. But Victor Ross had proven to be more resourceful than expected. Instead of wallowing in grief, he'd started investigating, asking questions that were attracting unwanted attention. When Santiago's contact in the FBI mentioned that Ross was former Special Forces, the game had changed. Now Tommy was insurance. If Victor got too close, the boy would disappear forever. If not, Santiago would complete the sale and vanish with enough money to set himself up anywhere in the world. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Santiago checked the security camera feed on his tablet. Michelle stood in the hallway, looking nervous and carrying a briefcase. He opened the door, studying her face carefully. "You look terrible, mi amor." "I got the money," Michelle said, pushing past him into the suite. 50,000, just like you asked. "Show me." Michelle set the briefcase on the coffee table and opened it. Neat stacks of $100 bills filled the interior, more money than she'd ever seen in one place. "Where did you get this?" Santiago asked, picking up one of the stacks and examining it. "I emptied my savings account and sold some jewelry." "Santiago, I need to see Tommy. I need to know he's okay." "The boy is fine. He's being looked after by associates of mine." "Where?" "Somewhere safe. Somewhere your husband will never find him." Michelle sank into a chair, exhaustion and stress finally overwhelming her. This wasn't supposed to happen. It was supposed to be simple. "Plans change, mi amor. Your husband has proven to be more persistent than we anticipated. He found my burner phone. He knows everything." Santiago's expression darkened. "What exactly does he know? About us, about the plan, about Tommy?" "Everything. And yet you managed to get the money and come here without being followed?" "I was careful. I switched cars 3 times, used back roads. No one followed me." Santiago walked to the window again, his mind racing. If Victor Ross truly knew everything, then Michelle was either incredibly lucky or incredibly stupid to have made it here undetected. Given what he knew about Ross's background, Santiago suspected it was the latter. "Santiago," Michelle said quietly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." "Of course. You're planning to give Tommy back, aren't you? This isn't just about the money." Santiago turned from the window, and Michelle saw something in his eyes that made her blood freeze. "What kind of question is that?" "The kind that a mother asks when she's terrified for her child. You should have thought about that before you agreed to this plan." "I agreed to fake a kidnapping so we could start a new life together. I never agreed to actually put Tommy in danger." Santiago's laugh was cold and humorless. "You naive little girl. Did you really think we could pull this off without risk? Did you think your military hero husband would just roll over and accept losing his son? You said you could handle Victor. I can, but handling him requires permanent solutions." The words hit Michelle like ice water. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that your husband is a problem that needs to be eliminated. And unfortunately, the boy has become a liability as well." Michelle shot to her feet. "No, absolutely not. I won't let you hurt Tommy. You won't let me." Santiago's voice was dangerous now. "I think you've forgotten who's in charge here, mi amor. I'm his mother. You're a spoiled suburban housewife who got in over her head. You wanted excitement. You wanted passion. You wanted to escape your boring life. Well, congratulations. You've got all 3. Michelle backed toward the door, but Santiago moved faster, blocking her path. "Where do you think you're going?" "To the police. I'll tell them everything. I'll make a deal." "And spend the rest of your life in prison? Leave Tommy to grow up in foster care?" "I don't think so. It's better than letting you kill him." Santiago grabbed Michelle's wrist, his grip iron strong. "You're not going anywhere. We're going to finish this together just like we planned. Let go of me." "Or what? You'll scream? You'll fight? Look around, mi amor. We're 40 floors up in a soundproof suite. No one can hear you, and no one is coming to save you." But Santiago was wrong. Someone was coming. At that moment, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in seconds later, bathing the suite in an eerie red glow. Santiago released Michelle and moved to his weapon cache hidden behind a false panel in the wall. "Who else knew you were coming here?" he demanded. "No one. I swear." Santiago's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Room service. The message was followed by an image that made Santiago's blood run cold. A photo of him and Michelle taken through the window moments earlier. Someone was watching them. Someone with professional-grade surveillance equipment. "Victor," Michelle whispered. Santiago grabbed his assault rifle and moved to the window, scanning the buildings across the street for any sign of sniper. "How did he find us?" "I don't know." The door to the suite exploded inward in a shower of splinters and smoke. Through the chaos, a figure in tactical gear rolled into the room, moving with deadly precision. Victor Ross had come for his son, and he wasn't planning to leave any loose ends behind. Chapter 6: The Hunter's Moon. The smoke grenade had bought Victor exactly 12 seconds, enough time to enter the suite, assess the threats, and take position behind the marble kitchen island. Santiago's training showed as he immediately sought cover and began laying down suppressing fire, but his shots were wild, panicked. Michelle screamed and dropped to the floor, crawling toward the bathroom as bullets shattered expensive artwork and punched holes in the suite's walls. Santiago. Victor's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Let's talk. Go to hell. Santiago's response came with another burst of automatic fire. Victor smiled grimly. Through his night vision goggles, he could see Santiago's position clearly, behind the overturned couch, amateur defensive posture, burning through ammunition too quickly. The man was dangerous but undisciplined. Where's my son? Victor called out. Dead, just like you're going to be. The lie was obvious, but it still sent rage coursing through Victor's veins. He'd been controlling his anger since the pier, channeling it into cold calculation. But Santiago's words threatened to unleash something darker. Through his earpiece, Charlie's voice provided updates. 2 more heat signatures moving up the stairwell. Looks like Santiago's backup is coming. How long? 3 minutes, maybe 4. Victor needed to end this quickly. He pulled a flashbang from his vest and counted down from 3. The grenade detonated with a blinding flash and deafening roar. Victor moved immediately, vaulting over the island and advancing on Santiago's position while the man was still disoriented. Santiago stumbled backward, his rifle sweeping wildly, but Victor was already inside his guard. A precise strike to the wrist sent the weapon flying, followed by an elbow to the solar plexus that dropped Santiago to his knees. Where is Tommy? Victor's voice was arctic calm as he pressed his Sig Sauer against Santiago's temple. Warehouse. Camden. Santiago gasped, struggling to breathe. Industrial District, Pier 15. Who else is involved? Just me and 3 guys I hired, independent contractors. Victor's finger tightened on the trigger. Every instinct screamed at him to end this monster's life, but he needed more information. The buyers you mentioned in your text. Who are they? Santiago's eyes widened. How did you? Who are they? Russians. They run children out of the port, ship them overseas. The elevator dinged in the hallway outside. Santiago's backup had arrived. Victor made a split-second decision. Instead of killing Santiago outright, he zip-tied the man's hands behind his back and dragged him toward the bathroom where Michelle was hiding. Michelle, get up. We're leaving. She looked up at him with tear-stained eyes. Victor, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted. Save it. Victor hauled Santiago to his feet. You're both coming with me. Santiago is going to show us exactly where my son is, and you're going to help me get him back. Why would I help you? Santiago snarled. Victor smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Santiago had ever seen. Because if Tommy's been hurt, I'm going to spend the next week showing you every technique I learned in Kandahar for extracting information from uncooperative prisoners. The suite's front door began to splinter as Santiago's men tried to force their way in. Victor guided his prisoners toward the balcony, where Wes waited with a rappelling setup. 3 hostiles in the hallway, Wes reported. We need to move now. Victor secured the rappelling line to both prisoners. Anyone tries anything heroic on the way down, and they get to test whether humans can actually fly. The descent was swift and professional. Wes had positioned their extraction vehicle, a stolen utility van, in the alley behind the hotel. Within minutes, they were speeding through Atlantic City's back streets while Charlie tracked the movements of Santiago's remaining men. They're not following, Charlie reported from his position on the roof. Looks like they're regrouping, probably trying to figure out what happened. Victor drove in silence, his mind focused on the task ahead. The warehouse district around Pier 15 was a maze of abandoned buildings and forgotten industrial sites. Perfect for hiding a kidnapped child, but also perfect for ambushes. In the back of the van, Michelle tried to make conversation with Santiago, but he'd withdrawn into sullen silence. Victor could see him in the rearview mirror, calculating, planning. The man wasn't finished fighting. "Victor," Michelle said finally, "what happens after we get Tommy back?" "You mean what happens to you?" "Yes." Victor considered the question. Michelle had betrayed him in the worst possible way, had put their son in mortal danger for her own selfish desires. But she was still Tommy's mother, and Tommy would need some stability after this trauma. "That depends," Victor said finally. "On what?" "On whether you can live with the consequences of what you've done, and on whether you can accept that things between us are over forever. I know you'll never forgive me." "Forgiveness isn't the issue, Michelle. Trust is, and you've shattered that beyond repair." As they approached Camden, Victor's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Luis. "Warehouse secured. 3 hostiles neutralized. Package is safe." Relief flooded through Victor's body like a drug. Tommy was alive, and Luis had found him. But Santiago didn't need to know that yet. "Santiago," Victor said, pulling into an empty parking lot and turning to face his prisoner. "We're almost there. Before we go in, I want you to understand something." "What?" "If my son has been harmed in any way, if he's been hurt, scared, traumatized, or even just hungry, I'm going to make you pay for it in ways that will make you beg for death." Santiago met Victor's gaze and saw something there that made him shrink back. This wasn't just anger or even hatred. This was the cold, implacable fury of a father pushed beyond all limits. "He's fine," Santiago said quickly. "The men I hired, they have kids of their own. They wouldn't hurt a child. For their sake, I hope you're right." Victor turned back to the wheel and drove toward the warehouse district, where his son waited and where Santiago Ellison would finally learn the true meaning of consequences. Behind them, Michelle wept silently, understanding that regardless of what happened next, the life she'd known was over forever. Chapter 7. The Reckoning Begins. The warehouse sat like a cancer among the rusted skeletons of Camden's industrial past. Pier 15 jutted into the Delaware River, surrounded by abandoned buildings that had once housed thriving businesses but now served as refuges for the desperate and criminal. Victor parked the van 3 blocks away and studied the target through binoculars. Luis had positioned himself on the roof of an adjacent building, his sniper rifle trained on the warehouse's main entrance. Through the scope, Victor could see his son through a dirty window on the 2nd floor. Tommy was sitting on a mattress, alive and apparently unharmed, but Victor's hands shook with rage at the sight of his child in that place. "Charlie, report," Victor whispered into his mic. "Thermal imaging shows 1 adult with the package on the 2nd floor. 3 more heat signatures on the ground level, but they're not moving. I think Luis got all the active hostiles." "Copy that." Victor turned to his prisoners in the back of the van. Santiago had been silent during the drive, but Michelle kept trying to see through the van's windows. "Is that where Tommy is?" she asked. "Yes. And he's alive, no thanks to you." Santiago finally spoke up. "What's your play here, Ross? You can't just walk in shooting. The place might be booby-trapped, and if something happens to you, your boy will starve to death in there." Victor smiled coldly. "Who said anything about walking in?" He pulled out his phone and speed-dialed a number. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Agent Riggs." "Harry, it's Victor Ross. I found my son. Where are you?" "I'll send backup. Pier 15, Camden. Warehouse with a blue roof. But I need you to do something for me first." "What?" "I need you to run a background check on the men who were supposed to be guarding Tommy. I want to know everything about them. Families, addresses, weaknesses." "Victor, what are you planning?" "Justice." Victor hung up and turned to Santiago. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk into that warehouse and tell whoever's left alive that the deal's off. You're going to collect my son and bring him out here unharmed." "And why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, I'm going to call the buyer you mentioned and tell them that you've been skimming money from their operations." "How long do you think you'd last after that?" Santiago's face went pale. "You don't know who you're dealing with. A smuggling operation run by Bratva out of the Port District, led by a man called Dmitry Volkov, who's been wanted by Interpol for 15 years. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Santiago. The question is, do you?" The truth was, Victor had no intention of letting Santiago anywhere near Tommy again. But he needed the man to believe he had a choice. Through his earpiece, Wes's voice crackled. Victor, we've got movement. Black SUV approaching from the north. Looks like Santiago's backup finally tracked us down. How many? For men, heavily armed. Professional setup. Victor's mind raced. Santiago's remaining team was moving in, probably to clean up loose ends and eliminate witnesses. That meant Tommy was in immediate danger. Change of plans, Victor announced. He zip-tied Santiago's ankles together and secured him to the van's floor. Michelle, you're staying here with our friend. If either of you tries to leave or call for help, Wes will put a bullet through your heads. Victor, wait. Michelle grabbed his arm. Let me come with you. Let me help get Tommy back. You've helped enough. Victor exited the van and moved toward the warehouse with practiced stealth. Through his scope, Luis tracked the approaching SUV while Charlie monitored communications intercepts. They're using military frequencies, Charlie reported. Former special forces just like Santiago. These guys are professionals. Copy that. Luis, do you have a shot on the SUV? Negative. Too much cover, and they're moving fast. Victor reached the warehouse's rear entrance just as the SUV screeched to a halt in front of the building. For men in tactical gear poured out, moving with the precision of a trained team. This is Froster Ross. Luis's voice came through the earpiece. I've got a problem. There's someone else on the second floor with your boy. Looks like they're arguing. Victor's blood ran cold. If Santiago's men were having second thoughts about the operation, Tommy could become a liability they'd eliminate to cover their tracks. Charlie, can you give me audio from inside? Working on it, got it. Patching you through now. Suddenly Victor could hear voices from inside the warehouse, transmitted through Charlie's directional microphone. Told you this was supposed to be clean. No kid was supposed to get hurt. Plans change, Murphy. The boss says the kid's seen too much. He's 3 years old. He doesn't even understand what's happening. Orders are orders. We dump the body in the river and torch this place. Victor's vision turned red. He'd found his son just in time to watch these animals debate murdering him. No more waiting. No more planning. Victor Ross went to war. He kicked in the rear door with explosive force, his assault rifle already tracking targets. The first man never saw him coming. A double tap to the chest dropped him instantly. The second man spun toward the sound, but died with Victor's knife buried in his throat. Upstairs. Now! Victor roared into his mic. Luis's rifle cracked from his overwatch position, and through the warehouse's grimy windows, Victor saw one of the men on the second floor go down in a spray of blood. The remaining terrorist, Murphy, according to the intercepted conversation, grabbed Tommy and held the child in front of him like a human shield. Back off! Murphy screamed. I'll kill him. Victor appeared at the top of the stairs like death incarnate, his rifle trained on Murphy's head despite the impossible shot angle. Put down the gun and step away from my son. I said back off, and I said put down the gun. Tommy saw his father and began to cry. Daddy, it's okay, buddy. Daddy's here. Murphy was young, maybe 25, with the look of a man who'd gotten in over his head. His hands shook as he pressed his pistol against Tommy's temple. I'll do it, man. I swear I'll do it. Victor studied the man's face, his posture, the way he held his weapon. Fear, desperation, but no real killer instinct. This was someone who'd never actually taken a life, someone who'd gotten involved for money without understanding the true cost. What's your first name, Murphy? What? Your first name. I'm Victor. This is my son, Tommy. What's your name? It's Pat. Pat Murphy. Okay, Pat. Here's what I think happened. You needed money, maybe for your family, maybe for medical bills. Santiago offered you easy cash for what seemed like a simple job. But now you're in deeper than you ever imagined, and you're scared. Pat's gun hand wavered slightly. You don't know anything about me. I know you've got a daughter, 7 years old, named Emma. I know your wife died in a car accident last year, and you've been struggling to pay for Emma's asthma treatments. Pat's eyes widened. How do you? Because I make it my business to know everything about people who threaten my family. I also know that Emma's staying with your sister tonight, and that you told her you'd be home in time to take her to school tomorrow morning. Stop talking. The question is, what kind of man does Emma see when you come home? Her father, who protected a child when things went bad? or a monster who murdered an innocent boy for money. Pat was crying now, the gun shaking violently in his grip. I can't go to prison. Emma needs me. Then make the right choice. For a long moment, the warehouse was silent except for Tommy's quiet sobbing and Pat's ragged breathing. Then, slowly, Pat lowered his weapon. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Victor moved faster than thought, sweeping Tommy into his arms while simultaneously kicking Pat's gun across the floor. In seconds, he had his son safe and Pat zip-tied on the ground. Tommy, are you hurt? Victor examined his son carefully, checking for injuries. I want to go home, Daddy. We're going home, buddy. Right now. But first, Victor had one more piece of business to finish. Santiago Ellison was about to learn what happened to people who threatened Victor Ross's family. Chapter 8. No Mercy for the Wicked. Back at the van, Santiago had worked one hand free from his restraints and was reaching for the burner phone Michelle had dropped on the floor. He never made it. Wes McCall materialized in the van's doorway like a ghost, his sidearm pressed against Santiago's temple before the man could react. Going somewhere? Wes asked conversationally. I was just trying to call your remaining contacts and warn them that Victor's coming. Yeah, I figured. Michelle looked up from where she'd been crying in the corner. Is Tommy okay? Did Victor find him? Kid's fine, but you might want to brace yourself for what comes next. What do you mean? Before Wes could answer, Victor appeared carrying Tommy in his arms. His son clung to him like a lifeline, small arms wrapped around his father's neck. Daddy, where's Mommy? Tommy asked, noticing Michelle for the first time. The question hung in the air like a blade. Victor looked at Michelle with eyes that held no warmth, no forgiveness, no trace of the man who had once loved her. Mommy made some very bad choices, buddy. She's going to have to go away for a while. How long? Victor's gaze never left Michelle's face. A very long time. I want to see him, Michelle said quietly. Please, Victor. He's my son, too. No. Victor's voice was absolute. You lost the right to call him your son when you put him in danger. Victor, please. Charlie, Victor spoke in his mic, call Agent Riggs. Tell him we've got the kidnappers in custody and we're ready for pickup. Copy that. Santiago, still zip-tied in the van, finally found his voice. You can't just hand us over to the FBI. I know things, Ross. Things that could make us both very rich. Victor set Tommy down carefully and turned his full attention to Santiago. What kind of things? The smuggling operation. I know their routes, their schedules, their contacts. We could take over the whole network. You want to make me a business proposition? Why not? You've got the skills. I've got the connections. We eliminate the current management and take over their territory. Victor appeared to consider this. That's actually not a terrible idea. Michelle looked shocked. Victor, you can't be serious. Why not? I've spent 5 years playing the suburban dad, but maybe it's time to get back to what I'm really good at. Santiago smiled for the first time since his capture. Now you're thinking like a professional. There's just one problem with your plan, Victor said conversationally. What's that? You seem to think I'm the kind of man who would partner with someone who threatened my son. Victor's hand shot out, closing around Santiago's throat with crushing force. Not enough to kill quickly, but enough to make every breath a struggle. Please, Santiago gasped. I can pay you. Name your price. My price. Victor's voice was barely a whisper. My price is your life. Victor, don't. Michelle's voice was urgent. Tommy's watching. Victor glanced at his son, who was indeed staring with wide, frightened eyes. For a moment, his grip loosened. Then Santiago made his final mistake. Your wife's right, he wheezed. You don't have the balls to do what needs to be done. That's why she came to me. She needed a real man. Victor's expression didn't change, but something fundamental shifted in the air around him. Even Wes stepped back involuntarily. Tommy, Victor said calmly, go sit with Uncle Wes for a minute. Daddy needs to have a conversation with the bad man. Victor, no. Michelle lunged forward, but Charlie appeared behind her, restraining her with professional efficiency. Is the bad man going to hurt us again, Daddy? Tommy asked. No, buddy. He's never going to hurt anyone again. What happened next took less than 30 seconds. Victor's hands moved with surgical precision, applying pressure to specific points on Santiago's neck and chest. There was no violence, no struggle, no dramatic last words. Santiago simply stopped breathing. When it was over, Victor calmly checked Santiago's pulse to confirm what everyone already knew, then turned to Agent Riggs, who had just arrived with a full FBI tactical team. "Agent Riggs, thank you for coming so quickly." Riggs stared at Santiago's body, then at Victor's completely calm demeanor. "Mr. Ross, what happened here?" Mr. Ellison attempted to escape and injured himself in the process. "Unfortunately, we were unable to revive him." "Injured himself?" "Yes. He appears to have suffered some kind of cardiac episode. Very tragic." Riggs looked around the scene. Michelle in zip ties, Santiago's body, Victor's team standing at attention like soldiers awaiting orders. He was a 20-year FBI veteran, and he'd seen enough to recognize when a story was complete fiction. He also recognized when that fiction was probably the only justice that would ever be served. "I see," Riggs said finally. "And the child?" "Tommy's fine. A little shaken up, but unharmed. The real kidnappers were eliminated during the rescue operation." "All of them?" "All of them." Riggs nodded slowly. "I'll need statements from everyone, but I think we can handle the paperwork fairly efficiently." As the FBI team processed the scene, Victor knelt down next to Tommy and spoke quietly with his son. Michelle watched from the back of a federal van, understanding that she would likely never see her child again. "What happens to her?" Wes asked, nodding toward Michelle. Victor's expression was stone. "She'll be charged as an accessory to kidnapping. With a good lawyer and cooperation with the authorities, she might get 8 to 10 years. And after that, she'll discover that some mistakes can't be undone. Some trust can't be rebuilt. Some bridges, once burned, can never be crossed again. You're never going to forgive her. I'm never going to forget what she did, what she was willing to sacrifice for her own selfishness." As Tommy fell asleep in his arms, Victor made a silent promise. His son would grow up safe, protected, and loved. But he would also grow up understanding that the world was full of people who would hurt you if you let them. And Victor Ross would make sure his son was never that vulnerable again. The wolf had protected his pack. Now it was time to teach the cub how to survive in a world full of predators. Chapter 9. Blood and Redemption. 6 months later, Victor sat in the family court of Philadelphia County, watching Michelle's defense attorney make a final plea for custody rights. She'd been sentenced to 7 years for conspiracy and accessory to kidnapping, but was arguing for supervised visitation with Tommy once she was. Judge Beverly Schultz reviewed the case files with the thoroughness of someone who understood that her decision would shape a child's entire future. "Mrs. Ross, you're asking this court to believe that your involvement in your son's kidnapping was motivated by love?" Michelle, dressed in an orange prison jumpsuit and looking haggard after months of incarceration, nodded earnestly. "Your Honor, I made terrible mistakes, but I never stopped loving Tommy. I was manipulated by Santiago Ellison into believing that what we were doing would be best for our son, by staging his kidnapping and planning to flee the country. I thought Victor was too dangerous to raise a child. His military background, the violence he's capable of. I was afraid for Tommy's safety." Victor's attorney, a sharp woman named Vivian Crawford, stood to object. "Your Honor, Mrs. Ross's own recorded communications show that her motivation was entirely selfish. She wanted to start a new life with her lover and saw her son as a prop in that fantasy." Judge Schultz raised a hand for silence. "Mr. Ross, you've been caring for Tommy alone for 6 months. How is he adjusting?" Victor stood, his bearings still military straight despite the civilian clothes. "He's doing well, Your Honor. He's been seeing a child psychologist to help process the trauma, and he's starting to sleep through the night again. We've established routines that give him stability and security." "And your feelings about Mrs. Ross's request for visitation?" "Tommy doesn't ask about his mother anymore, Your Honor. At first he did, but when I explained that she was the one who arranged for the bad men to take him away, he stopped asking. Children are remarkably adaptable when they understand the truth." Michelle's face crumpled. "Victor, please. I know I made mistakes, but I'm still his mother." Victor turned to look at her for the first time during the hearing. You stop being his mother the moment you put him in danger for your own gratification. People can change. Some people can, but not you, Michelle. You had every opportunity to call off the plan when you realized Tommy might be hurt, but you didn't. You chose your boyfriend over your son's safety. Judge Schultz had been taking notes throughout the exchange. Mrs. Ross, I've reviewed the evidence in this case extensively. Your recorded communications show a pattern of deception and manipulation spanning months. More importantly, they show a willingness to endanger your child for personal gain. Your Honor, I was manipulated. You were an active participant. The court finds that your actions constitute such a fundamental breach of parental responsibility that continued contact would not serve the child's best interests. Michelle's attorney stood. Your Honor, we're not asking for immediate contact. We're asking for the possibility of supervised visitation after Mrs. Ross completes her sentence and demonstrates rehabilitation. Motion denied. Judge Schultz's voice was final. Mr. Ross is awarded sole custody with no visitation rights for Mrs. Ross. The court further orders that Mrs. Ross is to have no contact with the child, direct or indirect, unless initiated by the child himself after reaching the age of majority. The gavel came down with the finality of a headsman's axe. Victor felt no satisfaction in Michelle's tears, no joy in her defeat. There was only the cold certainty that Tommy would never again be put at risk by his mother's selfishness. Outside the courthouse, Tommy waited with Wes, who had become an unofficial uncle and bodyguard. The boy was resilient. Children often were, but Victor could see the wariness in his son's eyes that hadn't been there before. Tommy had learned that the world could be dangerous, that even people who claimed to love you could hurt you. It was a hard lesson for a 4-year-old, but it was better than learning it at 14. Or 24. Or never learning it at all. How did it go, Daddy? Tommy asked as they walked to the car. The judge decided that you're going to stay with me, Victor said. No one's going to take you away again. Good. I don't want to live with Mommy anymore. The words were matter of fact, delivered with the brutal honesty that only children possessed. Michelle had destroyed her son's trust so completely that he'd written her off with the simple pragmatism of youth. That evening, Victor tucked Tommy into bed and read him a story about a knight who protected his kingdom from dragons. It was Tommy's favorite book these days. He seemed drawn to stories about heroes who fought monsters. Daddy, Tommy said as Victor was turning off the light, are there still bad people out there? Yes, buddy, there are. But you'll protect me from them? Always. And you'll teach me how to protect myself? Victor smiled. His son was already thinking like a survivor. When you're older, yes. I'll teach you everything I know. Promise? I promise. After Tommy fell asleep, Victor sat in his study and reviewed the files that Charlie had compiled on the remaining members of Santiago's network. The FBI had shut down the immediate operation, but organized crime was like a hydra, cut off one head, and 2 more appeared. There were loose ends that needed tying up. People who had facilitated Tommy's kidnapping, who had known what Santiago was planning and done nothing to stop it. The law might be finished with them, but Victor wasn't. His phone buzzed with a text from Luis, target acquired. Awaiting orders. Victor looked at the photo Luis had sent. One of Santiago's former associates, a man named Phil Doty who recruited children for trafficking operations. He was currently in Miami, thinking he was safe because Santiago was dead and the FBI investigation was closed. Victor typed back, execute. He'd made a promise to his son to protect him from the monsters in the world. But sometimes protection meant more than just defense. Sometimes it meant making sure the monsters couldn't hurt anyone else. Over the next hour, his phone buzzed with similar confirmations from Wes, Charlie, and Luis. For more of Santiago's associates, eliminated with the quiet efficiency of professionals who understood that some crimes deserved more than prison time. By the time Victor went to bed, 17 people connected to his son's kidnapping were dead. The message would spread through the underground networks. Victor Ross's family was off limits, and anyone who thought otherwise would discover that some fathers never forgive and never forget. In the morning, Tommy would wake up to pancakes and cartoons, blissfully unaware that his father had spent the night ensuring that particular nightmare could never happen again. Victor had been a soldier, a warrior, a protector of the innocent. He tried to put that life behind him to become a normal suburban father. But normal fathers didn't have the skills to track down international criminals. Normal fathers couldn't eliminate threats with surgical precision. Normal fathers couldn't ensure their children's safety through means the law would never sanction. Victor Ross wasn't a normal father. He was something far more dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose except his son, and the skills to make anyone who threatened that son simply disappear. As he finally drifted off to sleep, Victor thought about Michelle, alone in her cell, finally understanding the true cost of her betrayal. She'd wanted excitement, passion, a life free from the constraints of suburban domesticity. She'd gotten exactly what she asked for, and now she'd spend the rest of her life learning that some prices are too high to pay and some betrayals echo forever. Victor Ross had taught her the hardest lesson of all. When you threaten a wolf's cub, you don't get a second chance. You don't get forgiveness. You don't get redemption. You get justice. And justice, as Michelle and Santiago had learned, was often sharper than mercy and far more permanent than forgiveness. The wolf protected his pack, always and forever. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.